I was known as the wild one by all the folks around. I was known as the wild.
True that you in one sitting drank 117 beers?
Yes.
Hollywood loves champagne toasts, but for some stars, the bottle became a lifelong curse. Behind the bright lights and blockbuster smiles were actors whose real performances happened off-camera, hiding hangovers, slurring lines, and drinking away careers that once defined an era. Last time, we uncovered 20 tragic stories of addiction and fame, but some of the wildest tales were still untold. Today, we're counting down 10 stars whose battles with alcohol became as legendary as their fame. Tell us in the comments which of these stories shocked you the most. Before fame became a family inheritance, John Barrymore was its blueprint. The grandfather of Drew Barrymore, he was once hailed as the greatest American actor of his generation, a Shakespearean prodigy whose voice and presence commanded every room. In the 1920s, he was Hollywood's golden god, brilliant, handsome, and irresistible. But with success came excess. Barrymore didn't just drink socially, he drank professionally. Whiskey became his morning coffee, and champagne his nightly lullaby. At first, his genius could outshine the hangovers. But by the 1930s, directors dreaded his name. He'd show up drunk, forget lines, and wander off set mid-scene. Studios began writing his drunkenness into scripts just to make filming possible. Friends described him as the world's greatest actor when he was sober enough to stand. By the time he died in 1942 at only 60, Barrymore's fortune was gone, his health destroyed, and his legacy stained. He was buried wearing his favorite suit, still clutching a glass of scotch. To this day, his downfall stands as Hollywood's first great cautionary tale, proof that talent can take you to the top, but the bottle can bring you crashing down even faster. When we think of Michael Landon, star of Little House on the Prairie, Bonanza, and Highway to Heaven, we often remember the wholesome dad figure, the face of family-friendly TV. But behind the warm smile was a man wrestling with quiet demons, including a growing dependence on alcohol that few viewers ever saw. Landon's rise from New York to Hollywood was impressive, from teenage actor to producer-director of the shows he starred in. He built an image of stability, faith, and hope. Yet by the late 1970s and into the 1980s, the off-screen reports began surfacing. Co-stars remembered Landon sipping vodka disguised in coffee cups, his mood shifting suddenly under pressure. In a 1983 interview, he admitted his drug habit had been absolute murder, and the drinking was part of the same escape. His devotion to work, writing, directing, acting, meant he rarely paused, rarely healed. Instead, the pressures stacked up and the drink offered relief. In April 1991, he was diagnosed with pancreatic cancer. He later believed his smoking and drinking had contributed to the disease. He died just months later, aged 54. Landon's story is one of contradiction. The man who gave us comfort and inspiration on screen, privately drowning in the very pain he tried to protect others from. Long before Hollywood began whispering about celebrity addictions, W.C. Fields turned it into an open secret. With his raspy voice, bulbous nose, and razor-sharp wit, he became one of the first true comedy stars of the silver screen. But his on-screen persona of the grumpy drunk wasn't an act. It was autobiography. Fields started his career as a juggler and vaudeville performer, charming crowds with dry humor and quick timing. But as fame grew, so did the gin habit. He hid bottles inside film props, sipping between takes to steady his hands. Directors learned to film his scenes early in the day, before his words began to slur. Despite the chaos, Fields remained brilliant. His humor biting, his delivery unmatched. But alcohol took everything else, his health, his relationships, and his reputation. By the 1940s, he was frail, living alone, and rarely seen without a drink within reach. On Christmas Day, 1946, his liver finally gave out. Even in death, the irony lingered. The man who made the world laugh at drunkenness was destroyed by it. W.C. Fields became Hollywood's first tragic clown, the original proof that comedy often hides the deepest kind of sorrow. To audiences, Spencer Tracy was the perfect leading man, strong, thoughtful, and sincere. On screen, he carried quiet power. Off screen, he carried heavy guilt. Raised in a strict Catholic family, Tracy battled his own conscience for much of his life. He loved deeply, sinned freely, and punished himself endlessly. And alcohol became both his comfort and his punishment. Even at the height of his fame, Tracy's drinking was legendary. He could vanish for days on benders, returning to the set, pale and trembling, yet somehow still deliver flawless performances. Directors built shooting schedules around his unpredictable nights. His drinking wrecked his marriage and weighed on his long, complicated relationship with Katharine Hepburn, who quietly protected him for decades. Friends described him as a tortured perfectionist, brilliant one moment, broken the next. He'd drink to quiet his mind, but the silence never lasted long. By the 1960s, years of abuse had ravaged his body. He filmed Guess Who's Coming to Dinner while seriously ill, and Hepburn later said she knew it would be his last. When Tracy died in 1967, the world mourned a legend, and Hollywood lost one of its greatest reminders that genius often walks hand in hand with pain. Andre the Giant wasn't just a man. He was a living legend. Standing over 7 feet tall and weighing more than 500 pounds, he was the kind of figure Hollywood could never invent. Known for his larger-than-life roles in wrestling and films like The Princess Bride, Andre seemed invincible. But behind the laughter and the gentle smile, he carried constant pain, and alcohol became his escape. Because of his size and the effects of acromegaly, Andre's joints ached every day of his life. To numb the agony, he drank, not socially, habitually. Crew members on movie sets recalled him downing cases of beer like water, 100, sometimes 120 cans in one sitting, and still being able to stand and tell stories. To his friends, it was impressive. To Andre, it was survival. His friends described him as kind, funny, and endlessly generous, but the bottle was always close by. As the years passed, his heart began to struggle under the strain. In January 1993, while in Paris to attend his father's funeral, Andre died quietly in his sleep, just 46 years old. He was a giant in every sense, in size, in spirit, and tragically, in the magnitude of his pain. Oliver Reed was a throwback to a wilder kind of actor, loud, fearless, and forever half-lit. He burst into fame with Oliver and the Three Musketeers, a barrel-chested symbol of British bravado. But behind the swagger was a man chasing escape at the bottom of every glass. Reed's drinking wasn't a secret, it was his brand. He once claimed he could drink 100 pints of beer in a day and still show up to work the next morning. Interviews turned chaotic, bar fights were routine, and talk show hosts braced themselves when his name appeared on the guest list. For years, his charm and talent balanced the damage, but time caught up. In 1999, while filming Gladiator in Malta, Reed went out for drinks with sailors at a local pub. He reportedly downed beers, rum, and whiskey, laughing and arm wrestling until he collapsed from a heart attack on the floor. He was 61. Director Ridley Scott finished Reed's remaining scenes using CGI, an eerie symbol of art outlasting the artist. Oliver Reed lived and died the way he always promised, with laughter, defiance, and a drink still in hand. His final performance became his most haunting. Few stars ever blurred the line between character and reality like Dudley Moore. In Arthur, 1981, he played a lovable millionaire who was rarely sober, a role that earned him an Oscar nomination and worldwide fame. But behind the laughter and charm, the character was dangerously close to the man himself. Moore's wit and musical talent made him a British national treasure before Hollywood even noticed. But success came with pressure he never quite knew how to handle. Alcohol became his steady companion, first at parties, then at home, then everywhere. Friends recalled how his humor turned from quick and clever to slurred and melancholy. He could make a room laugh until tears fell, even when his own eyes were tired from crying. By the 1990s, the toll was visible. His speech slowed, his coordination faltered, and many assumed the drinking had finally broken him. In reality, Moore was battling a rare brain disorder that mimicked the symptoms of drunkenness. But decades of heavy drinking had weakened him beyond repair. He died in 2002 at just 66. The man who made the world laugh with tales of excess left quietly, remembered not for scandal but for the tenderness beneath the jokes. Dean Martin made cool look effortless. With a glass in one hand and a grin in the other, he became the crown jewel of the Rat Pack, Hollywood's kings of charm, women, and whiskey. His stage act was built around being half drunk, but what audiences never knew was that the act wasn't always acting. Behind the smooth voice and easy jokes was a man quietly numbing loneliness. Martin grew up poor, fought his way into show business, and spent decades keeping up appearances beside flashier stars like Frank Sinatra. He didn't crave attention, he craved escape. On stage, the laughter was loud enough to drown out everything else. After the tragic death of his son Dino in 1987, the sparkle vanished from Dean's eyes. Friends said he withdrew from the world, spending his final years alone in Beverly Hills, nursing drinks and watching old westerns. The public saw grace and humor. His inner circle saw heartbreak. When Martin passed away in 1995, the lights on the Las Vegas Strip dimmed in his honor. To the end, he remained the king of cool. But behind the tuxedo and the tumbler, Dean Martin was proof that even the smoothest smile can hide a lifetime of sorrow. Richard Harris lived his life as if moderation were a foreign language. The Irish-born actor of Camelot, A Man Called Horse, and Harry Potter fame possessed the kind of voice that could shake walls, and a thirst that could empty pubs. Charismatic, fiery, and defiant, Harris became one of Hollywood's great hellraisers, a man whose talent was equaled only by his appetite for chaos. He once claimed he'd been drunk for 15 years straight, not exaggerating for effect, but stating it as fact. Alongside drinking partners Peter O'Toole and Richard Burton, Harris turned excess into legend. Their all-night binges became Hollywood folklore, tales of shattered hotel rooms and impromptu poetry readings shouted through clouds of cigarette smoke. But beneath the bravado was exhaustion. Decades of drinking left Harris hospitalized multiple times, his liver ravaged. In the 1980s, he finally swore off alcohol after collapsing on a London street. "I had become a parody of myself," he admitted later. Sobriety gave him a final act, the aging wizard in Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's Stone, a role that introduced him to a new generation. When Richard Harris died in 2002, his body was worn but his spirit intact. He'd lived loudly, loved deeply, and burned bright enough for 3 lifetimes. Orson Welles was a cinematic titan, the mind behind Citizen Kane, still regarded as one of the greatest films of all time. At just 25, he became a legend, revolutionizing film and storytelling with a singular vision. But while the world marveled at his brilliance, Welles struggled with a quieter, more dangerous battle. The bottle became his constant companion, the one thing that could drown out the pressures of being a genius and the crushing weight of failure. For all his artistic achievements, Welles's career was defined by what he could never quite control, his spiraling love affair with alcohol. His drinking grew worse as his fame faded and his weight ballooned. Once considered a master of Hollywood, Welles found himself blacklisted by the very industry he'd once ruled. He was reduced to taking on low-budget projects, often unable to finish films due to the constant battle with his addictions. Welles's tragic irony was that the same brilliance that made him an icon also made him too complex to thrive in the industry. He died in 1985, aged 70, a beloved broken figure whose final years were spent drinking to forget the empire he had lost. Orson Welles will forever be remembered for his groundbreaking genius and the haunting reminder that greatness can come at a steep, painful cost. From John Barrymore's tragic brilliance to Peter O'Toole's fiery charm, these stories reveal a side of Hollywood rarely seen beneath the lights. Fame gave them wealth, applause, and immortality, but it couldn't silence the loneliness or ease the pain that kept them reaching for another drink. Some found redemption, others never did. Yet even in their downfall, they left behind moments of beauty that time can't erase. Their struggles remind us that genius is fragile, and that behind every glamorous smile might live a story of heartbreak and escape. Which of these stories struck you the most? Share your thoughts below, and if you enjoyed this video, YouTube thinks you'll love this one.